Look, I've been doing this job for 300 cycles now, monitoring species, cataloging their behavioral patterns, making sure nobody violates the Galactic Convention on mental privacy, and I thought I'd seen everything. I really did, but then they assigned me to evaluate a human named Kai Okonkwo. And well, let's just say the universe has a twisted sense of humor. The thing about humans is that they're supposed to be transparent, right? Wide open books, emotionally volatile. Can't keep a secret to save their lives. That's what every single Zenop psychology course taught us at the academy. The Threen professors would laugh. Actually laugh at how easily humans telegraphed their intentions, how their faces betrayed every thought, how their vocal patterns shifted with the slightest emotional change. Adorable primitives, they called them, with all the condescension you'd expect from a species that communicates through bioluminescent chromatophores. So when the council assigned me to perform a routine mental scan on Kai, just a formality, really, since humans had recently joined the Galactic Trade Consortium and needed security clearances for the Antares station posting, I expected maybe 20 minutes of work. Scan the surface thoughts, confirm no hostile intent, file the paperwork, grab some fermented kelch at the cantina, and call it a day. Yeah, that's not how it went. Kai walked into my office looking exactly like you'd expect a human to look. Medium height by their standards, dark skin that caught the overhead lighting in interesting ways, close-cropped hair, and these eyes that seemed perpetually amused by some private joke. He wore the standard gray jumpsuit that all applicants wore, and he moved with this loose, easy confidence that made my neck frill twitch. Too casual, too comfortable. Humans were supposed to be nervous around telepaths. It was practically hardwired into their neurology after millions of years of evolution on a planet where predators hunted by reading body language. "Morning," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk without being invited. "I'm Kai. You must be Evaluator Rix'tharon. That's a mouthful, isn't it?" "Mind if I just call you Rix?" I did mind, actually, but humans had this peculiar habit of bulldozing through social protocols with what they called friendliness, which mostly just seemed like weaponized informality to me. I gestured with my secondary arms toward the neural interface crown sitting on the desk between us. "Mr. Okonkwo, if you would place the interface on your cranium, we can begin the evaluation. Standard procedure. I will scan your surface thoughts, verify your psychological stability, confirm the absence of any compulsions, buried commands, or hostile programming." "Hostile programming?" He laughed. Actually laughed, picking up the interface and examining it like it was a curious artifact, rather than sophisticated technology that could map every neuron in his primitive brain. "Do I look like someone who's been programmed? Although, I guess if I had been, I wouldn't know it, would I? That's the thing about good programming. The programmed never realize they're running someone else's code." He was talking too much, which was normal for humans, but there was something underneath the chatter, something that made my professional instincts prickle. I've scanned thousands of beings across dozens of species, and you develop a sense for when someone is hiding something. It's not about what they say, it's about the way they fill space with words, the way they create noise to cover up silence. "Just put it on," I said, a bit more sharply than I intended. Kai shrugged and settled the crown onto his head, the neural sensors automatically adjusting to fit his skull structure. The interface hummed to life, and I felt the familiar connections snap into place, my consciousness brushing against his, ready to slide through the surface layers of thought and memory like a swimmer moving through water. Except the water was frozen solid. I blinked all three eyes in rapid succession, a Threen expression of deep confusion, and tried again. Nothing. Or rather, not nothing, but walls. Not shields, exactly, because shields were active constructs, deliberate barriers that broadcasters erected when they wanted privacy. Shields were illegal under the convention, punishable by exile from consortium space. This wasn't a shield. This was something else entirely. It was like his mind had architecture, layers upon layers of cognitive structures, organized with the precision of a master ranger, each thought wrapped in contextual frameworks that redirected my probes, sent them sliding off in tangents, loop them back to innocuous surface impressions. I caught flashes him eating breakfast that morning, some kind of grain mixed with fruit, him reading a news feed about shipping schedules, him thinking about someone named Amara and whether he should call her, but nothing deeper, nothing real. "Is there a problem?" Kai asked, and there was no concern in his voice, just mild curiosity, like he was asking about the weather. Your neural architecture is unusual," I said carefully, trying to maintain professional composure while my mind raced through possibilities. Genetic modification? No, too subtle. Surgical implants? The scanners would have detected those. Natural mutation? In all of human history, there had never been a documented case of a human with natural telepathic defenses. They were about as psychically sensitive as a rock. That was half their charm and all of their vulnerability. Unusual how? He tilted his head, and I swear there was amusement dancing in those dark eyes. I pushed harder, abandoning finesse for brute force, driving my consciousness into his mind like a battering ram. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, I broke through. And what I saw made my blood run cold. Memories. Not his memories. Or rather, not memories from this lifetime. Fragments of other lives, other times, other versions of himself, all layered on top of each other like geological strata. I saw a battlefield lit by the glow of plasma fire. Saw Kai, no, someone who wore his face but spoke a different language, commanding troops against an enemy I didn't recognize. I saw a laboratory where equations covered every surface, where that same face stared at data streams that bent probability itself. I saw a prison, saw torture, saw him, saw a version of him die badly and wake up somewhere else. Someone else carrying memories like scars across incarnations. Then the connection snapped shut so hard I actually jerked backward in my chair, my head pounding from the psychic recoil. "You all right there, Rix?" Kai asked, leaning forward with what looked like genuine concern. "You went a bit green around the edges. Or, more green. Greener. Are you normally this shade of teal, or what are you?" I whispered, my voice coming out as a rasping hiss through my vocal sacs. He went very still. The casual mask dropped away, and for just a moment I saw something ancient looking out through those young eyes. Then he smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile anymore. It was sad, tired. The smile of someone who'd carried a weight for so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. "That's a complicated question," he said quietly. "What am I right now? A human?" Kai Okonkwo, 28 standard years old. Born on Earth, raised in Lagos, educated at the Interstellar Academy on Mars. What have I been? Well, that's where things get messy. I should have called security. Protocol demanded it, an unexplained psychic anomaly, a potential threat to station safety, a human who somehow carried memories of lives that couldn't possibly be his. Every regulation in the book said I should hit the panic button under my desk and let armed responders sort it out. Instead, I asked, "How many lives?" He rubbed his face with both hands, suddenly looking exhausted. "I stopped counting at 43. That was about 6 lifetimes ago. Maybe 7. Time gets weird when you remember dying. That's impossible. Reincarnation is a myth. Memory doesn't transfer across biological deaths. Consciousness is an emergent property of complex neural networks, and when the network degrades, yeah, I've heard the speech. Given the speech, actually, in at least 3 different lives when I was a scientist trying to figure out why I remembered things I shouldn't. Want to know the punchiest conclusion I came to?" He leaned back, and there was bitter humor in his voice now. "The universe doesn't care what's supposed to be impossible. It just does what it does, and we scramble to explain it afterward." I pulled up his file on my workstation, scanning through the biographical data with new eyes. Everything looked normal. Standard human upbringing. Decent academic record. Psychological evaluations showing slightly above average intelligence and emotional stability. No red flags. No anomalies. Just another human trying to make his way in a galaxy that had recently admitted his species to the big kids' table. Except now I knew that every evaluation, every scan, every psychological profile had been sliding off the surface of something pempher. Something that had learned how to hide in plain sight across dozens of lifetimes. The council needs to know about this, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they sounded hollow.
Know about what?
That one human out of billions carried impossible memories, that reincarnation might actually exist, that everything we thought we knew about consciousness and death might need to be rewritten. They won't believe you, Kai said simply. I'm not registering as a threat on any of your scans. No hostile intent, no dangerous capabilities, no reason to deny me clearance. You can try to explain what you saw, but it'll sound like you had a neural misfire. Bad equipment. Reader error. Maybe you need a vacation, Rix. The stress of the job getting to you. He was right, and we both knew it. Without evidence, without some way to reproduce the effect, I'd sound like I was having a breakdown. The 3 medical board would recommend therapy and a leave of absence. My career would stall, and Kai would get his clearance and disappear into the vast machinery of the consortium. Just another human among millions. Why? I asked. Why hide it? If what you're saying is true, if you really carry memories of dozens of lives, you could be invaluable to science, to medicine, to weapons development. He cut me off, and there was steel in his voice now. To intelligence agencies who want to know how consciousness persists, to religious factions who'd either worship me or burn me, depending on their theology. I've been valuable before, Rix. I've been studied, dissected, literally in 2 of my lives, imprisoned, weaponized and turned into a symbol. You know what I learned? Being special is a great way to lose your freedom. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. I'd worked in galactic bureaucracy long enough to know he was right. The moment the council learned about him, Kai would become a project, a puzzle to solve, a resource to exploit. They'd peel away his privacy layer by layer until nothing remained but data points and research papers. So what do you want? I asked finally. What every version of me has always wanted, he said, and the sadness was back in his voice, heavy as a collapsing star. To just live, have a normal life. Or as normal as it gets when you remember being burned at the stake in one life and dying in a spaceship crash in another. Work a job, make some friends, maybe fall in love, though that's gotten complicated after you've loved and lost the same soul across multiple incarnations, and you're never quite sure if you'll recognize them when you meet them again. He stood up, removing the neural crown and setting it gently on my desk. You're going to approve my clearance, Rix. Not because I'm threatening you, I'm not, but because there's nothing in your regulations that says remembering past lives is a disqualifying condition, and because deep down you're curious. You want to know if this is real, if consciousness is more than just neurons firing, if there's something after death besides entropy and silence. I stared at him for a long moment, my primary brain arguing with my secondary brain about protocol versus ethics, versus the sheer impossibility of the situation. Finally, I pulled up the approval form on my terminal. I'm noting an unusual neural architecture in your file, I said slowly. Recommending periodic monitoring, standard precaution for anomalous readings. You'll need to check in with psych services every 6 months for follow-up scans. Kai nodded, understanding the compromise. I'd give him his freedom, but I'd also create a paper trail, a way to keep tabs on him without throwing him to the wolves. Fair enough, he said. One more thing, though. The secret, the one you saw when you broke through. The reincarnation thing, I interrupted. He laughed, actually laughed, and shook his head. No, Rix. That's just weird biology, cosmic quirk, whatever you want to call it. The real secret, the one I've never spoken out loud in any of my lives, is why it keeps happening. Why I keep coming back. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, cursor blinking on the approval button, and against my better judgment I asked. Kai walked to the door, paused with his hand on the frame, and looked back at me. The exhaustion was gone now, replaced by something else, determination, maybe, or purpose forged across lifetimes of experience. Because every single time I die, he said quietly, I remember one moment with perfect clarity. Just before the end, just before consciousness fades, I see it, a glimpse of what's coming. Something massive approaching this galaxy, moving through dimensions we can't perceive, leaving dead civilizations in its wake. And I wake up again, Another life, another chance. Trying to figure out how to warn everyone, how to prepare, how to... He stopped, smiled, that tired smile again. But hey, I'm probably just crazy, right? Past life memories sound schizophrenic delusion when you say them out loud. Just a glitch in my neural architecture, nothing to worry about. The door slid shut behind him, leaving me alone in my office with a half-completed approval form and the worst case of professional paranoia I'd ever experienced. I could hear my pulse in my auditory receptors, a rapid-fire rhythm that matched the racing of my thoughts. He was lying. Or he was insane. Or this was the possibility that made my skin crawl. He was telling the truth, and somewhere in the dark between stars, something was coming that could end everything, and the only warning we had was locked in the fractured memories of a human who died and returned so many times he'd stopped counting. I hit the approval button. Kai Okonkwo was cleared for Antares Station, and I needed to do some research. Starting with historical records of civilizations that had vanished without explanation, of dead zones in space where probes went silent, of astronomical anomalies that didn't quite match any known phenomena. Because if, and I couldn't believe I was even entertaining this thought, if Kai was right, if something was coming, then someone needed to start paying attention to the warnings carried by a man who couldn't stay dead, even if that someone was just one paranoid 3N evaluator who'd accidentally read the mind of the only human who remembered what lay waiting in the dark. 3 months passed, and I wish I could say I forgot about Kai Okonkwo and his impossible memories. I really do. But here's the thing about having a mystery dropped in your lap by a reincarnating human with apocalyptic visions. It tends to stick with you, like a bad song, or a parasite, or both. I'd approved his clearance, sent him off to Antares Station, and tried to go back to my normal routine of scanning traders, merchants, and bureaucrats who thought very loudly about their lunch plans and not much else. Boring work, safe work, the kind of work that doesn't make you question the fundamental nature of consciousness and mortality. Except I couldn't stop thinking about those fragments I'd seen in his mind. The dying civilizations, the thing moving through dimensions, the way he'd described it with such casual certainty, like he was discussing weather patterns instead of cosmic extinction events. So I started digging, quietly, during my off hours, which meant my coworkers thought I'd developed a fascinating new hobby or a serious stimulant addiction, given how much time I spent in the archives section of the Galactic database. Neither was technically wrong. The data was there, once you knew how to look for it, scattered across thousands of years, buried in archaeological reports and astronomical surveys that nobody read because they were filed under unexplained phenomena, and everyone knew that was bureaucratic code for we don't know, we don't care, we're not getting funded to figure it out. 17 civilizations in the past 50,000 years had simply stopped, not gradually declined, not been conquered, not fallen to plague or war or environmental collapse, just stopped. One day they were there, thriving, transmitting, building, expanding, and the next, silence. Their worlds remained intact, their cities mostly undamaged, but every single living thing was gone. Not dead, because there were no bodies. Just gone. Like something had reached down and plucked them out of reality. The Galactic Council's official explanation? Mass ascension events. Entire species achieving a higher state of consciousness and leaving physical form behind. Very spiritual, very uplifting. Very much not based on any actual evidence beyond, well, we can't find them anywhere. But there were notes in the margins of those reports. Observations from the scientific teams who'd examined the empty worlds. Discrepancies. Things that didn't quite add up. Residual energy signatures that matched no known technology. Spatial anomalies that persisted for decades after the disappearances. And this was the part that made my neck frill stand straight up. Reports from the few survey ships that had gotten too close to these dead zones. Ships that came back with crews who couldn't quite remember what they'd seen, who described a presence in the dark. Something watching, something waiting. Those reports were always flagged as psychological contamination, and the crews were given mandatory therapy and memory suppressants. Case closed, file it away, nothing to see here. I was 3 weeks into my research spiral, surviving on stimulants and the growing conviction that I was either onto something huge or descending into full conspiracy theorist territory, when my workstation chimed with an incoming message. Priority flag. From Antares Station. From Kai. My hands were shaking when I opened it. The message was text only, which was weird because most humans preferred video communication. They were very visual, very expressive, liked to see faces when they talked. Text meant he didn't want any record of his expression, his body language, anything that could be analyzed beyond the words themselves. The message read, Rix, need to talk. Not through official channels. There's a human bar on level 7 called the Drowned Cat. Tomorrow, 2200 hours station time. Come alone. I know you've been digging. We need to compare notes before someone notices. K. I stared at that message for probably 10 minutes, my 3 brains arguing with each other about whether this was incredibly stupid or just moderately stupid. On one hand, meeting a psychic anomaly alone in an unsupervised location violated about 15 safety protocols. On the other hand, if Kai wanted to hurt me, he'd had plenty of opportunities when he was in my office with his hand on neural interface equipment that could have been weaponized with the right knowledge. Also, and this was the kicker, he knew I'd been researching, which meant either he'd been monitoring me somehow or someone else had been monitoring me and told him, and either option was deeply concerning from a career longevity perspective. So obviously I went. Because I've always been terrible at making good life decisions, and also because the part of me that became a psych evaluator in the first place, the part that wanted to understand how minds worked, why consciousness existed, what made beings tick, that part was screaming that this was important, that Kai wasn't crazy or lying, that something was genuinely wrong with the universe and most people just weren't paying attention. The Drowned Cat turned out to be exactly the kind of establishment you'd expect from a name like that. Dimly lit, smelling of alcohol and species-specific pheromones, filled with off-duty workers who wanted to forget about their jobs for a few hours. The decor was aggressively Earth-themed, with old nautical equipment bolted to the walls and a holographic aquarium running behind the bar that displayed creatures humans called fish, which looked deeply unsettling if you asked me. Who wants to eat something with that many bones? I found Kai at a corner booth, partially hidden by a structural support column. He'd aged in 3 months, or maybe I just hadn't noticed before how tired he looked. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there during his evaluation, and he was drinking something amber-colored from a glass that was already half empty. You came, he said as I slid into the booth across from him. Wasn't sure you would. Most people, when faced with evidence that reality is weirder than they thought, they decide they'd rather not know. Ignorance is comfortable. Say, I'm not most people, I said, which was probably the most arrogant thing I'd ever claimed, but it was also true, and I've spent the last 3 weeks reading reports about 17 dead civilizations that everyone wants to pretend ascended to higher consciousness, rather than admit they were exterminated by something we don't understand. Kai's expression shifted. Surprise, then approval, then something darker. 17. You found 17. There are 32, actually, but 15 of the others were so long ago that the Council reclassified them as natural extinction events. Easier to file that way. He pulled out a datapad and slid it across the table. On the screen was a map, not a axial map, but something weirder, showing dimensional coordinates I barely understood. Red markers dotted the display, each one presumably representing a dead world, a vanished civilization, but it was the pattern that made my blood run cold. They weren't random, they formed a path, a trajectory, moving through the galaxy like footprints. Like something was walking through space-time itself, stepping on civilizations the way you or I might step on insects without even noticing. It's moving, I whispered. Toward us. Toward the core sectors, yes, Kai confirmed, taking another drink. Slowly. It takes thousands of years between events, which is why nobody's connected them. Galactic Council thinks in terms of political cycles a few hundred years at most. They can't see patterns that take 50 millennia to develop. But I can, because I've lived through enough cycles to spot the shape of it. How? The question burst out of me before I could stop it. How do you remember across lives? What mechanism allows consciousness to persist beyond biological death? Kai laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think I know? I'm not a scientist, Rix. Well, I was. Twice, and both times I died before figuring it out. Best theory I have is that consciousness isn't generated by the brain. It's received by it, like a radio tuning into a signal. Death disrupts the tuning, but the signal persists, and sometimes, rarely, maybe 1 in a trillion cases, it manages to retune to a new receiver. New body, same signal, all the memories intact. I struggled for words. That's not how neuroscience works. At all. Yeah. Well, neuroscience also can't explain how some species communicate faster than light through quantum entanglement, but they do it anyway. The universe is weirder than our models, Rix. Always has been. We just pretend otherwise because it makes us feel smart. I looked at the map again, tracing the pattern with my eyes. So this thing, whatever it is, it's been hunting civilizations for at least 50,000 years, moving through the galaxy like a predator. Why hasn't anyone raised an alarm? Why isn't the entire consortium mobilizing? Because every time someone tries, they get shut down. Kai's voice went flat, emotionless, which somehow made the words more frightening. I've tried 5 times across different lives. Twice, I got far enough to present evidence to council officials. Both times, the evidence disappeared, my access was revoked, and I ended up labeled as mentally unstable. In one life, I died in an airlock accident 3 days after filing my report. In another, I just vanished. No record, no investigation, nothing. You're saying there's a conspiracy that someone in the council knows and is actively suppressing. I'm saying that when you look into the void, sometimes the void doesn't like being observed. He leaned forward, and there was intensity in his eyes now. Urgency. Every civilization that got close to figuring it out, they're the ones that disappeared. The others, the ones that died ignorant, they lasted longer. There's a correlation, Rix. Knowledge is what triggers the response. My head was spinning. This was too much, too fast, too far outside anything my training had prepared me for. So what are you suggesting? That we just don't investigate? Let it come? Hope it misses us? No. Kai shook his head. I'm suggesting we investigate differently, quietly, without official channels. Because the moment you report this up the chain, you become a target, and I've died enough times to know I don't want that for you. There was surprising tenderness in that last statement, and it made me realize something uncomfortable. Kai cared. About me. Specifically. Not because we were friends, we barely knew each other, but because I was now one of the few beings in the galaxy who believed him, who'd seen the evidence and hadn't turned away. That made me valuable. Or maybe just lonely for him, after dozens of lives spent trying to warn people who wouldn't listen. What do you need from me? I asked finally. He smiled, and for the first time since I'd met him, it looked genuinely hopeful. Your access to the psych evaluation database. I need to scan for others like me. People with unusual neural architectures, consciousness patterns that don't match their species' baseline. If I'm the only one who reincarnates, we're probably doomed. But if there are others, if this is a rare but reproducible phenomenon, maybe we can build a network. People who remember, who can see the long patterns, who can work across lifetimes to prepare. You want to build a secret organization of reincarnating psychics to fight an interdimensional predator that's been killing civilizations for 50,000 years. I said it out loud just to hear how insane it sounded. That's your plan. You got a better one? Kai shot back. Because I'm open to suggestions, Rix. I've been trying to solve this problem for longer than your species has had written language, and I'm running out of ideas. I thought about my career, about the comfortable life I'd built, the retirement plan I'd been contributing to the nice apartment in the mid-levels where the artificial gravity was stable and the air recyclers didn't smell like industrial solvent. I thought about how easy it would be to walk away from this conversation, report Kai as psychologically unstable, and go back to scanning merchants and filing paperwork. Then I thought about those 32 dead worlds. The empty cities, the silence where civilizations used to be. The thing moving through dimensions, walking toward us with footsteps measured in millennia. All right, I heard myself say, I'm in. But if we're doing this, we do it smart. No heroics, no dramatic revelations, no getting ourselves killed before we've accomplished anything useful. Deal, Kai said immediately. First rule of fighting immortal predators, stay alive long enough to actually fight back. We spent the next 4 hours in that booth, hunched over datapads and holographic displays, building our plan. It was insane. It was probably hopeless. We were 2 people, one reincarnating human and one paranoid 3 evaluator, against something that had been ending civilizations since before most current species existed. But here's what I realized as the night wore on and the bar slowly emptied around us. Hope doesn't come from having good odds. Hope comes from refusing to give up even when the odds are terrible. Kai had been refusing for lifetimes. The least I could do was refuse alongside him for one. We found 3 others in the following weeks. A Kronar engineer named Yuki, who remembered 17 lives and kept detailed journals across incarnations. A Ven diplomat called Hassan who'd spent 6 lifetimes trying to warn people and had finally given up until Kai contacted him. And this one surprised us. A human teenager named Zara, who was only on her 2nd life but had perfect recall of dying on Earth in the 21st century and waking up 300 years later on Mars. 5 of us. 5 reincarnating consciousness across 3 species, connected by neural anomalies and impossible memories, meeting in secret to plan for a threat that most people couldn't perceive. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The thing in the dark kept moving, slow and patient, harvesting civilizations like a farmer collecting grain. But now, for the first time in 50,000 years, someone was paying attention. Someone remembered. Someone was preparing. And when it finally arrived, when it reached the core sectors and turned its attention to the trillions of lives that thought themselves safe, we'd be ready. Not to win, maybe. The odds of actually defeating something that ancient and powerful, well, let's just say I wasn't betting my retirement fund on it. But to fight, to resist, to make it remember that consciousness, once awakened, doesn't go quietly into instinct. Yeah, we could do that. Kai looked at me across the table during our last planning session, his eyes reflecting the holographic starfield we'd been analyzing, and said something I'll never forget. You know what the real secret is, Rix? The one I never spoke out loud until now? It's not that I remember dying. Everyone dies. That's just biology. The secret is that I remember why I keep coming back. It's not fate, or cosmic duty, or anything mystical like that. It's simpler. Every time I die right before the end, I think, not yet. There's still work to do. Still people to warn. Still a chance, however slim, to make a difference. And apparently, the universe listens to that. To the stubborn refusal to quit. He grinned, and it transformed his face, made him look younger, less tired. So that's the plan, really. We refuse to quit. We document everything. We prepare everyone we can. We build networks across lifetimes if necessary. And when the thing in the dark finally shows up, we look it in whatever passes for its eyes and we say, not today, not our galaxy, not without a fight. I raised my glass. I'd switched to drinking actual alcohol at some point. Threen liver could handle it and clinked it against his. Not without a fight, I agree. Around us, the universe continued its slow spiral through space-time, indifferent to our plans, our hopes, our desperate gamble against extinction. Somewhere in the dark between dimensions, something ancient and hungry continued its patient walk through the galaxy. But now it was being watched, remembered, resisted, and maybe, just maybe, that would make all the difference. Or maybe we were 5 crazy people tilting at cosmic windmills, destined to fail and be forgotten like everyone else who'd tried. Either way, I thought as I left the bar and headed back to my apartment, my datapad full of classified information and my head full of impossible plans. Either way, at least we tried. Sometimes, that's all you can do. Try, and hope the universe is listening. And maybe, across all the cycles and lives and deaths yet to come, that stubborn hope would be enough. We'd find out. Eventually, after all, we had time. Kai always came back. And now, so would the rest of us, carrying the memory forward, life after life, until either we won or the universe ran out of ways for consciousness to persist. I gave it 60-40 odds, which, considering we were fighting something that had killed 32 civilians without breaking stride, wasn't bad. Not bad at all.